Welcome everybody to the Dreambuildrs podcast. I am very excited for today's talk. We're going to talk about purpose and life purpose. And purpose perhaps is a big topic for many of us. Like, how can you find it? And how can you actually live a more meaningful life? And if you're thinking right now, like, well, that's probably not for me, then I really encourage you to listen to this interview because I am actually sitting down with Elisabeth Kingsley, and she's an ICF Certified Professional Coach, tamer of inner critics, and she also loves to connect people to their hearts and to their intuition. So, Elisabeth, welcome. I would love to start off, first of all, before we dive into purpose, how we can find our purpose and what our critics are in that, with your backstory, because I think it's quite interesting. You moved to Portugal, where we actually met a couple of years ago. I'm living in Portugal as well, and we met. I think it was on one of my events with Inspirational Talks and Networking. Mm-hmm. And lately, you've also been a speaker at twice actually at my event, which I really liked. And therefore, I was also like, yeah, I really need to invite Elisabeth to talk about this topic because you're also passionate about it, about life purpose. So tell us a little bit more about your backstory, why you came to Portugal, and also perhaps why purpose is such an integral part of your work as a coach.
Sure, yeah. So I'm from the US. I was born in Los Angeles and I grew up in Atlanta and then landed in Seattle, Washington for university, where I started a nonprofit and then also spent a lot of time working at a Fortune 500 company in their marketing department. And it was during those years at that corporation that I just had an ongoing sense that this isn't quite the right trajectory for me, but I'm not sure what is. And I really wanted to find work that was more meaningful, but for a while, I just really didn't know what that was. Mm-hmm. And after about 5 or 6 years at that company, I just had this moment of like, I need to shake things up now. Otherwise, this feeling is just going to persist. And so I didn't have a complete plan, but enough to kind of make one step or fairly big leap at that moment, which was to quit that job, take a couple months off with a plan of coming back and getting some different work, but in a similar industry, and starting a 2-year coach training program. And I thought those are enough kind of shifts to at least get me moving forward in a little bit of a different direction. And I did mostly follow that plan. But the wrench that got thrown in, which is related to how I ended up in Portugal, is that I took a couple months and came here on holiday by myself. And on that trip, I met my now partner, which I was not expecting. So we had a great holiday. I went back to the US. He stayed here in Portugal. We were on different continents for about a little over a year. I started my coach training. I got another job. And then we decided about 3 years ago that, yeah, maybe we should try being on the same continent, which is how I've ended up here. And also simultaneously, these past 3 years been more full-time doing my coaching work.
Great choice that you came to Portugal. No, definitely. I really like it. Why did you actually came here to travel? Because I think that's interesting. Was it the intended choice to come here to Portugal?
Everyone asks that, and it was not something that I thought about deeply. It was, I'm going to quit this job. I have this time, like who gets this in life to have a month or two to kind of do whatever? Where should I go? Well, I've kind of always wanted to go to Portugal. Okay. Okay. It was no more complex than that, which I think is interesting because in my work, one of the things, we'll maybe get to it, but there's so much that we overthink.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it's very evident from my story that decision kind of changed the trajectory of things for me in a good way. And it's not something that I thought about that much. I just kind of went with, the first idea that came to my head.
As what you say, I think sometimes the best choices are the choices that we make with our heart or with our gut, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like your decision, like I really have to go there, but I don't know why. And then you
Yeah.
just do it and don't overthink it. So that's also interesting to see. And I would love to know more about why purpose in your work is so important to you.
Yeah, purpose for me is less about the thing you're doing and more about the person that you're being.
Hmm.
And when I coach people, I always ask about what they really care about, what really matters to them, what their values are. Sometimes we even create a purpose statement that's pulled from their values and also the moments in their life where they felt most fulfilled, because
Hmm.
those moments are usually really telling when it comes to
Yeah.
purpose. So that's why it's important to me, because purpose is connected to who people are at their core. And so much of my work is about getting to that and knowing that for oneself and then living from that place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes it's been clouded over for a number of reasons in our life, or in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. We kind of forget who we are. And so having that kind of purpose, this is who I am, to come back to is really important.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting that you say like, yeah, who am I? You know, who are you actually? You know, I've been looking for that answer for years. So like for everybody who's listening now, I think many people are searching for who you truly are, right? What you're made of and what you're here to do. Like, and this is of course part of your purpose. And I'd love to know from you, like, how do we get there? Like, what are some simple steps that you can take
Yeah.
to get to your purpose, or to get to understand what you're truly made of and what you're here to do, right?
Yeah, I've mentioned a few already. One is to focus on being before the thing you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose isn't all about just some thing you're meant to do in the world, though sometimes it's that. And then the other thing I do when I do create purpose statements with people is I have them tell stories, just moments in their life when they felt completely alive, 100% fulfilled and satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really dig in. Well, what were you doing? What were you feeling? And they can be stories from childhood. They can be just a moment you remember when you were, walking in your neighborhood. And what I do, they tell, like 8 or 10 stories, and I write down everything they're saying. And what happens at the end is that there's a very strong theme that comes through, whether they were talking about something they accomplished in life or just a moment in childhood when they were laughing and having so much fun that they felt like life was amazing. And there's themes that come up throughout all those stories. And so we take out all those themes and say, like, what does this say about you? And more often than not, the top like 10-ish are central to who they are, comprised of their values, can help them get to that feeling of being fully alive and living on purpose in a satisfying way. And then we tie it to the contribution they want to make from that place.
That's amazing. So it's about collecting your, basically your history, like where you're most alive,
Mm-hmm.
like the most positive stories and perhaps also some negative ones, and then combining that into, like you would say, like a purpose statement or so, like what
Pulling out the
what you're
theme,
here
and
to
then
contribute to. Yeah.
using those themes to create a statement. Yeah.
All right. So okay, and then you have, let's say, written down your purpose, which is amazing, right? Then you know more or less like what your teams are and what you're here to do and contribute to. But what is then the next step? Because you also know as a coach probably that finding your purpose is great, but there's another thing that you actually can start living it out, right? So
Yeah.
what, how can people start living their purpose, like really aligning with that, with those teams? What can they do? What are some simple steps people can take to do that?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to keep coming back to it. You can't like write it once and put it in a drawer. It has to be something that, one, is really meaningful to you, whatever the words or the statement that you come up with. And then you keep coming back to it on a daily basis in a way that's meaningful to you, so you can get yourself in the actual feeling on a daily basis of what purpose feels like to you. And then the other thing is to like not put pressure to have it all figured out to be some giant big leap or change that you make in life, but to just look at like, what's one next step, one small next step that's going to get me more moving towards this, and do that next step and see where that leads. And don't get caught up in having to have the whole picture figured out. Sometimes people like come to these crossroads in life, if you will, where they just know something has to be different, and they get a little clear on their purpose, if you want to call it that, or the thing they want or the thing that needs to change. They make this big leap and it feels incredible. And then what happens is that they haven't anticipated what I call the neutral zone. So this old way of life has ended. They've launched themselves into this new thing. But they find themselves in this like kind of confusing, ambiguous territory where this thing has ended, something else is beginning, but they're in the middle. And it helps when you're like making steps towards more meaningful, purposeful living, is to expect that neutral zone. I know I personally have been like really thrown off by what is this feeling? I thought I'd made all these good choices and now I'm like questioning all of them. I'm not sure how everything's gonna work. And I'm like, oh, this is the neutral zone, and it's normal to be in this place of transition and to really pay attention to what comes up in that space. It's probably what has the biggest lesson for you to keep you going towards what you want, but it might feel like kind of crappy.
I love what you said also in the beginning of your answer, that sometimes purpose can be that big that it's good to take a small step first of all. I think that's super important, because we tend to get perhaps quite overwhelmed with, oh wow, now I know what my purpose is. How am I going to live that out? I had the same. So it's good to start with these small steps. But then what you mentioned, I think is also very important about that neutral zone. Like once you were there, you took some steps, and then what's next, right? So what is holding people back? What are some common thoughts that people play with? Like what do you see in your coaching practice, for example?
Yeah. First, I should mention the concept of the neutral zone is not mine. It's from an author. His name is William Bridges, and he wrote a couple books, but the one that the neutral zone is from it's a book called Transitions, which I highly recommend to anyone amidst change or transition or anticipating some transition. It really helps normalize the neutral zone. Things that come up in the neutral zone, is that what we want to talk about? Okay. Well, here's a couple things that I have yet in my own neutral zones or with people that I work with who are making shifts and changes, to find someone who doesn't have an inner critic. And neutral zone, so like something's ended, something's beginning, you're in the ambiguous in between, or some people like to call it the messy middle. That is prime territory for inner critic, and that voice that says, what have you done? You're not good enough. This isn't going to work, to get really, really, really loud. And so there's an opportunity to become that voice's, if you will, friend, and get to know it and understand where it came from. It usually developed somewhere early in life, in childhood, to help keep you safe. And now later in life, it's operating out of old context. So it needs to kind of understand like where you're at now in life, that you're an adult and you're safe. And we can kind of calm down and let you make, or even help you make decisions for moving forward, and not kind of freak out at every move that nothing's going to work, and then start feeding lies and judgments about not being good enough or everything going to fail. Yeah. The other thing that happens in the neutral zone a lot is that we get really just caught up in our thinking brains, trying to like analyze and figure it out, and how can I make this work? And that's great, unless you're forgetting about your other two centers of intelligence, which are your heart and your gut. And particularly when you're pursuing the things that are most meaningful to you in life, your heart and your gut have a lot to offer you in terms of what is going to be meaningful, or what that next step might be. And they don't always give you the information in like full sentences or thoughts the way your thinking brain does, but more just like a sense or a word or one idea. So it falls nicely in line with that, like just one next step. Your heart and your gut are really good at like, one next step, here's what would be meaningful, let's do it, and let things unfold from there.
I think it's very interesting what you just mentioned, because we often tend to build decisions from our brains and our minds, and what you said, like, yeah, no, I really have to think what I need to do next, and how I can overcome my challenges. But what if we could just listen more to our, what you said, to our bodies, to our heart and our gut? How can we start listening more to that? How can we get out of our brain and listen more to, let's say, our body? Because our body has a huge decision making how do you say, the huge decision making process, and they can make decisions also. So how can you start building those decisions from your gut and your heart?
Yeah. So for me, having a coach has really helped. It helps to literally have another person ask me, and what is your heart saying? And hear that answer. Of course, I can, journal about those same questions. What does my heart have to say? What does my gut have to say? Which helps. But having a trained professional to kind of hear that and pull some of that information out of you, I found really helpful. Another thing is just recognizing that each of those centers of intelligence, they speak differently. So it's like just a learning that when I know I'm in my head, when I'm hearing a lot and it's really loud. And so I can learn to recognize, oh, that's all head. I'm going to be quiet and maybe even just like put my hands right here and try to feel like what this part of me is saying or wanting right now. Because your heart is more of like a still small voice, or like needs some quiet to really be heard. So it's putting some sort of practice into your life where you are quiet, and that's different for everyone. Some people find that while they're running or walking. Some people find that while they're doing the dishes. Some people have a really great meditation practice that they do, and that's where they connect. But so whatever your way is of getting quiet and going there. And then gut answers, like just knowing how that part speaks. The gut is very like instinct based. And so it really usually doesn't have a lot to say per se. It's usually like a very strong feeling, or maybe like one word, like don't do it. Or I guess that's 3 words, but you know what I mean? Like, yes, no, stop. And just knowing that, like, oh, my gut is saying whatever it's saying, it will be like a quick thing, and learning to listen for the different ways of the different parts of you speak, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's gold. And I also would like to go back to what you said earlier, before we talked about decision making from your gut. You said, like, if we're in a neutral zone and you want to make those steps to have a more meaningful life and and think more about your contribution. But we tend to have these thoughts that we are perhaps not good enough, or how do we get out from there?
Oh, how do you get out from there? We've sort of started to talk about how you get out from there. I wish I could tell you that it was like a magic wand or like a special pill that's like a one and done, and you'll never be in that place again of second guessing yourself or feeling not good enough. But my experience tells me that it's more of a practice of recognizing when that voice is showing up and learning to pause and shift to a different way of thinking. Learning to recognize when that voice usually doesn't tell the truth, and to be able to say, like, thank you for your concern. I know that this is true, and the truth is almost always you are good enough, you do have what it takes, or maybe this learning or this experience could help you get what you need to keep moving forward. So it's a practice of paying attention to those sneaky voices, and they are sneaky. They use your greatest strengths against you. So like if you're a really empathetic person, they might overuse your empathy and tell you that you have to take care of this person and you have to say yes to all these requests and please and please and please because you care so much about everyone. And suddenly you've sabotaged your own honoring of yourself and what's important to you, because that sneaky little voice was taking one of your greatest strengths, which is being an empathetic person in the world, and kind of overusing it. So it's just looking out for stuff like that and learning what your particular critic or self-saboteur, whatever you want to call it, what its way of most often getting to you is. Yeah,
I think we all have those, what you said, those sneaky voices inside, right? They can be very sneaky.
Yeah, they are sneaky, but getting to know them. One of the ones, is it useful if I tell you one of mine that I've
absolutely, yeah.
had to work on? One of mine is this like stickler voice, if you will, who sees things very black and white, like right decision, wrong decision. You have to get this completely perfect or don't do it at all. And when I start believing that, I forget or like don't see the perspective that like actually there's 20 right ways to do this task, or actually there's 50 next steps I could take right now to move me towards what I want, because that stickler voice is saying you have to choose the exact right one and you don't want to mess it up. And so I really had to catch that one, whose underlying intention like wants me to be successful. That's why it's sneaky, but it's telling me I have to be perfect in order to move forward. So when I catch that, I can open up a lot more options for myself and take some of the pressure off and like keep stepping forward, which is what we all want, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I recognize what you say, because I also have many of these voices inside my head.
Yeah, we all do. Ask anyone. It's like, what's your saying today?
Especially when it comes about, starting new projects or so. Like, for example, this podcast. I wanted to do that for a very long time. And then you have all these voices in your head like, yeah, maybe next year, or are you ready for it? It's holding me off to start things.
And what was its lie? Because they're always lying and making you believe it like it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
What was its lie about the podcast?
The lie about the podcast. Am I fully capable of doing it, or so, something like this? I think that will be the lie, because I think I am capable and I like to have these conversations. So
yeah.
So yeah, so these kind of things. So that's interesting that comes up. And you also said like, okay, so what are then the next steps, right? How can we keep momentum to, okay, we are aware of these inner voices, but we also know what our purpose is. How can we keep having momentum to live our purpose on a daily basis? Because I think that's super important, and not see it as something that, this is something that we're going to contribute to only in 10 or 15 years from now, right?
Yeah. You definitely have to make it a daily thing. So what's gonna have me today? Like we've mentioned, taking that step, but also feeling that feeling of fulfillment. So it's picking or starting to know ways that in a given day you can feel fulfillment and satisfaction, and also forward movement, and finding like your way of doing that on a daily basis, that you are doing it right now, and every day as you're moving towards the thing. Because if you don't find daily fulfillment and satisfaction, by the time you get to whatever the end goal is, you won't be satisfied there either. We have to learn daily how to find meaning, fulfillment, and satisfaction while we're pursuing our things. Otherwise, everything we tick off the box will just be oh, this is kind of disappointing. What's next? So that presence in what is right now, and that it is enough, and there's a lot of joy to be had in each day.
I think like one of the things that also helped me a lot was by getting outside of my comfort zone, and not like huge big steps, but like small steps, simple small steps to get outside of my comfort zone, so that I can keep growing and keep working towards my real big purpose. And you can start living out your purpose on a small basis, and then do that every single day. I think that's super important. So yeah, I would love to know more about your work, like what you're doing as a coach. I think it's also cool for people to know like what kind of work you're doing, and how they can approach you. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, as you might be able to tell, I do work with people in transition. So something in their life is ended, either by choice or circumstance, and they're on their way to a new beginning. Again, sometimes they know what it is, sometimes they don't. But I often work with people in the middle, where things are kind of ambiguous and scary, confusing. Also, as we talked about, like full of opportunity for growth and learning. So I meet people there, both personally and also like in a corporate professional life, when people find themselves in the in-between stages. And then I also do a lot of work with like inner critic and self-sabotaging, and asking questions to help people really get to know the thing, the voice I call it, or the self that's most frequently derailing them. And then we work together with some ways to speak to that part of ourselves differently, retrain that part of ourselves, to not take over, but to just be a smaller voice and listen to a different, more wise part of ourselves on a more consistent basis. Yeah.
Thank you for your insights. I think what I like the most from this conversation is that, purpose is not something that just happens overnight.
Yeah.
We need to start working on it on a daily basis, so, especially when we are in a transition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a roundup or a wrap up. I would love to know, for any person that is perhaps in a professional job right now, and they are perhaps stuck, they want to get unstuck, they want to get to this more meaningful life and find more fulfillment and like satisfaction. What is one tip or one advice that you can give right now for them, so that they can start understanding better who they are, and they can start living out what truly matters to them?
I would say clarify your values. So I have one on my website, a values worksheet. There's lots of stuff out there in the world. Find a way to get really clear on what your top 5-ish values are. That's a way of saying like what is most important to you in life, and get really clear on what that is. And then take a look at your current circumstances and find out which of those 5 things you're honoring well and maybe which you're honoring not so well. And that the ones you're maybe not honoring so well are probably a clue to what you could add into your life or what change you might need to make to be able to honor that thing that's really important to you more fully. That would be my number one first step if you're feeling like something's not quite right here.
It's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to share in this conversation before we round up?
Yeah, and it's related to what you are doing in the world, and that is that this idea of like pursuing meaning, pursuing purpose, it's really much easier in community. It's not, I don't think we're meant to do it alone. So whether it's events or small groups or friends or people that you just know who are also looking for this in their life, like it's important to share, have people that know what's most important to you and you know what's most important to them, so you can help each other kind of keep moving and pushing forward. So find community around this and don't think of it as just an individual job.
I love what you said, because that also has been such a big part of my journey. So in helping to understand like what my purpose is, and especially how I can start aligning with it and living it out. So to become part of communities of like-minded people who are having those kind of same interests and who are encouraging you and uplifting you on a daily basis to really support you in the realization of, you know, your dreams and your legacy. So I think that's one of the success factors as well. So
and people who you can say out loud to, hey, my inner critic is telling me this week. Like,
yes, open sharing.
Really powerful when you can tell someone else, this is what this voice is telling me. As soon as you say it out loud, it loses some of its power. The other person can usually, you know, give you a piece of truth versus whatever lie you've been believing in your head. So that community can really help a lot.
Yes. So Elisabeth, where can people find you? I know on your website, elisabethkingsley.com, right?
Yeah, Elisabeth with an S, Kingsley.com. And I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn. Those are probably the best places to find me. Yeah.
Awesome. And I would suggest to everybody listening, perhaps you told about the value sheet, right? So for everybody that's stuck right now, who wants to find more meaning in their life, and want to find a little bit more enrichment of, you know, what your central themes in your life are going to be, perhaps go to the website of Elisabeth and download that value sheet. That can be very, very helpful to take those first steps to get unstuck and find more meaning in your life.
Yeah. Sure.
So go for it. And then Elisabeth, I am very thankful for this conversation, for your time. And obviously I'm gonna follow your work in the coming years, like I've been following your work already. So yeah, thank you very much for this conversation. And I'm looking forward to see you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
And to the listeners, thank you all for listening, and I'm hoping to see you back soon. Cheers.
All right, cheers.